Welcome back to r/RipeStories, where we read stories from our own subreddit that cover a wide range of topics such as IDontWorkHereLady, r/Am I the Jerk, and entitled People. If you enjoy my content, please don't forget to click subscribe to join our awesome community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. This one is titled "Book Smart Does Not Equate Street Smart" from our own subreddit r/RipeStories. I'm taking a bit of a leap back to high school with this little story, to a time where one of my friends' family owned a decently popular family-run restaurant on a busy road. At the time, there was about 6 of us that would frequently hang out together and chill or talk schoolwork or whatever. We were a very diverse group of varied interests with one key overlapping trait: we were the advanced course kids. The thing with advanced course kids is, as this post is titled, "Book smart does not equate street smarts." So the regular group is hanging out in the family restaurant, working on homework and joking around, as one does in high school. Occasionally we would interrupt our work to talk to the parents who were in the kitchen area, because to us they worked hard, and if we could get them to let out a laugh, maybe they would be a little less stressed. This one instance though showed how stupid we could be. When an active robbery situation occurs, the recommended course of action is to keep your head down and do whatever is necessary to keep the robber as calm as possible and just do as they say. Well, when you have an overprotective group of high schoolers in the restaurant, that advice is not the first thing to come to mind. Instead, we start verbally berating the guy in question until he started backing toward the door. One of us grabbed the nearest phone and called the cops, while the rest of us followed him onto the street. Myself and one other stood by the door in case he wasn't alone. We were scoping out the area for any other possible suspicious characters, while the other 3 chased after the guy. My time perspective got really messed up during all of this, but I do know that a few minutes after my friends returned, they lost the guy's trail, the cops finally arrived at the restaurant. We were all high on adrenaline, but the one thing we had going for us was our insanely accurate descriptions of the robber in question. Our interviews by the officers and descriptions of the perpetrator actually helped finally bring the guy to justice some weeks later, when he tried the same stunt at another small restaurant and was finally caught. I will say though, we were reprimanded because we were unaware of whether or not he had a weapon. That simply was not our main concern though. Our main concern was the safety of a family we all adored and had practically accepted as our own. If the same situation were to occur today, I don't know if I could say I would do the same, but I do know that if it were not for a few shakily written journal entries and my mother's retelling of the events from her perspective, because the cops did inform our parents of our brilliant stupidity, I don't know if I would feel I could recall enough details to do the retelling of a modicum of justice. What I will say is, even all this time later, the 6 of us still have an insane sense of morality and justice, and I am so happy that hasn't changed one bit. You know guys, I gotta agree, it is a very good thing to keep positive character traits over time. Then again, I feel it is easier to get rid of the good traits instead of the bad ones, if you ask me. And by the way guys, on a quick side note, if you're interested in me reading out your story, then I suggest you head on over to r/RipeStories on Reddit and post your own story there. It would be very kind if you could check for any possible grammatical errors and remove any swear words. The next one was posted by the lovely Stacy Rose on our own subreddit, and it is titled "Guess a Dress and Heels Makes Me a Manager." I went shopping yesterday at Best Buy to take a look at their gaming computers, because I am planning on buying myself a new one eventually now that I got a new job. I was just browsing the shelves as usual, minding my own business, when I heard a lady scream. I couldn't tell what she was screaming or where she was located at, and looked around while still standing where I was. The screaming stopped, so I figured whatever it was might have been taken care of, but I was wrong. The employees at Best Buy wear a vest sort of like the ones you see the Walmart workers wear with their store name on them, and the employees have name tags on and masks. I was wearing a black dress, a black cat mask and black heels. I had just gone on a date with a nice guy who took me out to dinner, that is why I was all dressed up. My hair was up and I had black cat earrings on too. Basically, I was wearing black from head to toe, nothing like the uniforms for the employees at Best Buy. The lady that was doing the screaming happened to see me and stormed up to me in a huff. She stopped in front of me and was not wearing a face mask. I should note she was violating the keep 6 feet apart rule, and she put her hands on her hips and said loudly, "You!" I just looked at her and said, "Ma'am, please back up, we are in a pandemic." She just glared at me and said, "You need to fire that guy at the door." I was stunned and said, "What?" She rolled her eyes at me and said loudly and slowly, "You have to fire the guy at the door." She was saying it like I was deaf and a child. I looked at her and said, "Ma'am, I don't work here. Please back up." "Why aren't you wearing a face mask?" She threw her hands up and screamed, "Not you too. Fire that guy now." I shook my head no, stepped back and said, "Ma'am, again, I don't work here. Please stop invading my personal space." I kept backing up slowly to get away from this crazy lady when I saw an employee rush down the aisle with a man who had a name tag on that said manager on it. The man with the manager name tag loudly said, "Ma'am, you cannot be in here unless you are wearing a face mask. Please stop harassing our customers." The lady looked at him and said, "Don't talk to me, you're not the manager, she is," pointing at me. I, still stepping back, said, "No, I am not. I don't work here. I told you many times," and continued to back up when she said, "Then why are you all dressed up like a manager?" And I stopped, looked down at my outfit, looked at the employee and the manager, looked at the lady and said, "Just because I decided to dress nicely doesn't mean I'm a manager here. Some people like to wear nice clothes," and shrugged my shoulders hoping it would sink into her head, but nope, she didn't believe me. She started yelling about how I was a lazy manager refusing to fire the guy at the door that told her to put a mask on, how we are all in some kind of conspiracy, and how this pandemic was not true, and she wouldn't shut up. She was getting louder and louder. Finally, the actual manager made a call on a radio for security, and soon there were 2 more people in the aisle. The lady then tried to bolt after seeing the security, but from what I saw, they caught up with her and escorted her screaming self out of the store. The manager apologized to me and asked me if I needed any help. I told him I was looking to buy a new gaming computer, so he had the employee that was with him help me out with any questions I had while he went to talk to the security guards about the crazy lady. From what I was told later, that lady was banned. I didn't know wearing a dress and heels made me look like a manager, the whole thing was just weird. I've never had an issue at Best Buy before, and this was the first time something like this happened there. Normally, I have issues at good old Walmart, not here. Thank you very much, Stacy, for the interesting story and for the title/thumbnail ideas. In addition, I would like to ask my Ripe stars, how many of you have gaming computers? You know guys, shortly, actually before I went to Thailand, I bought a gaming computer, but now that was kind of a useless purchase because it does not seem like I will be going back anytime soon. And the next one was posted by user Mama-san, also on our own subreddit, and it is titled Diva Update. Sweet Ripe can use it if he wants. Not many know, but I'm getting my medication adjusted right now. After some back and forth with the insurance company, my doctor finally found a medicine they approved. To my dissatisfaction, I now have to be on an antipsychotic. For over 40 years I have struggled with mental illness. It took a few years just to get recognized as having depression, a few more years to diagnose that I'm actually bipolar 2 and have anxiety. My messed up life started in early teens, my family couldn't make heads or tails of my erratic moods, my school was able to set up free weekly visits with the school counselor. Before the school year ended, my parents pulled me from the counselor while telling me that playing with toys was not the way to fix me. I was then taken to a traditional psychiatrist. I didn't understand why I was taken from a teacher I trusted in a brightly lit environment to some strange man who spoke to me harshly in a dark room with no bright colors and nothing kid-friendly. This caused me to shut down and refuse to have anything to do with that man. After that, my parents just tried to hide that I was different. Back then, the stigma of mental health issues was something to be ashamed of and kept hidden. In my later teens, or later, I'm not sure, I became very ill and my parents put me in a hospital to run every medical test for non-mental illness. I found out they hadn't sent me to a military hospital despite the much lower cost because I had tried to end my life. They were terrified that it would adversely affect my dad's career if people knew they had a crazy child. I had to threaten to run away and never come back to get them to take me out of that place. While I was there, the doctors diagnosed me as depressed but gave my parents hope in the idea that I might have food allergies. They told my parents that it can sometimes cause strange behavior. It was a fairly new and trendy thing to test kids for food allergies, so they made an appointment for me to turn into a pincushion, testing by injecting an extract of the foods. My testing was scheduled to start at 2:30 p.m. and last 30 to 45 minutes. I rolled up my sleeve and gritted my teeth for what I thought was another round of medical torture, so my oh so wonderful parents could say I was not crazy. In short, I am allergic to milk, beef, soy and bananas. In long, milk was tested first. I remember the needle poking me, but then everything went dark. I felt like some hands were on my arms and a slight breeze on my face. Then I heard someone say, "Do we need oxygen? No, she's coming around." My vision returned, but the rest of the testing passed in a blur, with only 2 other foods being able to be tested. Beef and soy thankfully were not quite as bad as milk. It was after 5 p.m. before we went home, with me needing to return the next day to finish my testing. I only reacted to bananas that day, however, my personality changed drastically. Under the banana influence, I became extremely obnoxious, annoying and aggressive. In essence, I became a Karen. This actually made my parents relieved. Now they could blame bananas and I was not crazy. Sadly, I still had mental health problems. My sister had a few talks with our parents and convinced them to get me therapy again. This doctor was mostly okay, but he kept trying to see if there was anything too adult happening to me. This caused a lot of stress. Pro tip: never have a full-blown panic attack in a psychiatrist's office. Due to this, I got committed to a psychiatric hospital. Thankfully, my parents stepped up and transferred me to a military hospital psyche ward. I spent a stressful but rewarding week there. I was finally given a full professional diagnosis of manic depression 2, depression is greater than mania, with moderate anxiety disorder. Thankfully, my dear husband has been my greatest support in staying mostly sane, and I sometimes have trouble understanding why he's still with me. So if anyone asks, I am crazy and I have papers to prove it. Very interesting life story, Mama-san. Thank you very much for sharing. But I gotta say guys, as far as I am aware, it took doctors, I think in general all over the world, way too long to recognize mental illnesses as real. I think not too long ago, maybe 30, 40, 50 years, nobody really understood or wanted to understand that mental health issues really exist. And as far as I am aware, here in Thailand, this is still the reality. Mental health problems are pretty much a taboo topic and not really talked about in public. Anyway guys, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and also like the video if you want to support me. Thank you very much in advance. And the next one is also from our own subreddit and it is titled, "Would I be the jerk if I maintain no contact with my just no mother-in-law even though she claims she has changed?" Hey Ripe family, it's been a while since I posted, but I need your help. Ripe, you can use this in a video if you want, but I know you don't really cover this topic anymore. Well, I do now. As most of you may remember, I went full no contact with my just no mother-in-law a little over a year ago. My husband went low contact and only spent time with her during major holidays and family events. Recently, things came to a head when dear husband's grandfather was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. We are both sad, but his grandfather is almost 90, so at least he had a long life. As a result of his diagnosis, mother-in-law decided to throw an early Thanksgiving and invited my husband to go. She informed him that it would primarily be her, mother-in-law's siblings. This already pushes the virus rules, but I digress, most of whom my husband doesn't get along with. As a result, he declined the invitation. Mother-in-law tried to guilt-trip him and he finally snapped on her. Hello shiny spine, he was firm and laid out exactly why he wouldn't be going and why he had both gone to the contact levels we had with her. 2 days later, sister-in-law messaged my husband and told him that she understood why we made the decisions we did, but mother-in-law is not the same person she was 5 years ago, and I, specifically, never gave her a chance to be seen in a different light. Keep in mind, I've been with my husband for 18 years as of May 2020 and just went no contact with toxic mother-in-law after Christmas of 2018, while husband just declined his first family function invite over the weekend. So, having read some of my stories about her, knowing she went out of her way to ruin her Christmas gift to me, am I the a-hole if I stay no contact with my just no mother-in-law? A list of other reasons, besides the stories I've already told here, that I went no contact include: despite knowing it always devolved into fights, she refused to not discuss politics at family functions. To her credit, she apparently stopped political talks after I stopped going to all family get-togethers last year. She never stood up for my husband when her siblings were cruel to him. She even expected him to apologize to his aunt when she reduced him to tears by mocking him and his bleeding heart. To her credit, she has apparently cut off one of her siblings, but not before some elderly abuse towards my husband's grandfather occurred. She treated me like a pariah for the first 10 years I was with my husband because of stories told to her about me by my husband's cousin, who is a known liar in the family, even before I started dating my husband. She called me a phase my dear husband was going through. She said, "No matter what happens, she will never be a part of this family." She sided with my husband's grandfather when he said, "Assault cases are all he said, she said," and believes that my husband is more in danger as a straight white male, her words, than anyone because of false allegations being so rampant. She makes snide remarks about my husband's weight. He's not as skinny as he was in high school, but he's not exactly fat either. When my health issues caused me to gain and then lose a large amount of weight through no control of mine, she sat me down on the couch and showed me a slideshow of how fat you used to be. To her credit, she has started complimenting my hair on the rare occasion she sees me. I could go on, but this post is too long as is. Please help me, this has been eating away at me for several days now. Thanks family. Update: the husband and I took your advice. We went to a D&D session. There's only 6 of us total and we all work and or live together, so everything is virus compliant. The day of just no mother-in-law's faux Thanksgiving and tomorrow we plan to smoke a brisket and chill at home. Thank you again to everyone for all the support. My fellow Ripe stars are the best. Real estate agent raises the price of house after we already paid our application fee. My girlfriend and I were looking for a place to live in a new city where she had just accepted an internship that did not pay but would hopefully open up big opportunities in the future. I travel for work, so it's easy for me to live anywhere. We looked and looked, but there was nothing in our price range, so we increased a few $100s and finally found a house. It was a bit pricey for what it was, but we were not finding any better places. The lease term was written as 1 or 2 years. We went ahead and submitted an application, which we were pretty confident about since we have good credit and my job pays pretty well. We specified that we wanted the 1-year lease as her internship was only 1 year long. So, a few days go by and we hear back from the agent. Our application was accepted, but the owner wants $150 more rent than was advertised per month since we were only wanting to sign the 1-year lease. I mentioned that it seemed unfair that she had taken our $100 application fee before telling us about this price increase, but I kept it pretty civil since I did not want to burn a bridge for the only viable option we had. She assured me, condescendingly, that this was perfectly legal and that the owner was entitled to it since he might have to go through the rental process again in a year, and since the rental market was so tight they could do whatever they wanted, and she was right. We had no other options, so I told her that I was sorry and that I would call her back after discussing with my girlfriend. We were so frustrated. The place was so expensive for what it was, especially considering the condition that it was in. It really was tiny. The bedrooms were about 10 feet by 10 feet, which made me feel a little claustrophobic, and the walls were very dirty from the former tenants who apparently had a couple big dogs living inside. There was literally dirt and grease smeared around the walls on the entire interior at about the height of a large dog. The yard was overgrown and trashed, but the lease stated that tenant would be responsible for all landscaping and even specified that we had to keep the lawn in good condition. The lawn was about 2 foot high, completely dead weeds. All of this we convinced ourselves that we would deal with. Scrub the walls and paint, get a lawnmower off Craigslist and pony up the water bill for resurrecting the lawn. Be minimalistic with our possessions, hopefully the new paint would take care of the lingering dog smell. We had paid $50 each for the application fee and now felt as if we had been bait and switched, but had no other good options and our deadline was coming up fast. My girlfriend was crying and we both felt like homeless misfits that were terrible at life. I could not sleep in our hotel that night, but when I pulled up my bookmarked Craigslist housing searches, I saw something new. A place that looked nice and was about $500 cheaper than the house. Actually inside our original price range. I cautioned myself that it was probably a scam, but sent an email anyways, and in the morning I got a phone call from a nice old man. I set up an appointment and it was great, spacious, clean and much cheaper. The landlord liked us and we signed a lease the same day. We felt so lucky and happy. We were still angry about the other house. The agent had taken our $100 and raised the price on us, probably because she knew how tight the rental market was in the area and that we may not have other options. It had been just one day since she informed us about the $150 monthly price increase. I typed an angry email about how we were bait and switched, etc., but knew that it probably would not get us our $100 back and that they would probably barely even read it. I asked my girlfriend if I should send it. She then came up with a brilliant plan for revenge. Do nothing. First, I deleted the email without sending it and we moved into our new place. A few days went by and I got a text message from the agent of the other house asking if we were still interested. I replied that we were still very interested and that we had gone on a trip but would be back in a week or so and would meet up to sign the lease then. She replied that since we were well qualified, that would be fine as long as we were sure we wanted the place. So we started settling into our new place and enjoying ourselves. About 10 days later, I received a call from the agent who seemed to have forgotten about us until then and she was frantic about getting the lease signed. I made up excuses. My girlfriend was very ill, we need a few more days. We are still 100% interested and I will call her on Monday to set up a meeting. On Monday, I typed up an email saying, "Sorry, but we decided not to move in after all. Thanks anyways." My girlfriend and I smiled nervously together as we shot the email off. The phone rang almost immediately. It was the agent. I exchanged glances with my girlfriend and answered it, putting her on speakerphone. She was very upset that she had not shown her place for over 2 weeks and that her well-qualified tenants were dropping out. She pleaded with me to reconsider.
"What if I drop the price back to the original price in the ad?"
she asked with desperation heavy in her voice. I pretended to think about it. I looked over at my girlfriend and she was silently laughing and hiding her face in her arms, overcome with emotion. I could feel the tension on the line as the agent hung on my next words. "Yeah, sorry, no," I cheerfully declined. The agent was distraught. I hung up. My girlfriend's plan had worked perfectly. We felt avenged. Next time, maybe she will think twice before bait and switching. The mispronunciation war. I work with a Nigerian woman with a clearly African name who I will call A here. She's perfectly happy to tell people how to pronounce her name if they have not come across it before, but it really is not difficult to get it right once you have been told. Enter O, anonymized despite being an a-hole. He decided that her name is too hard a name for him to bother even trying with even after she has told him and calls her Abby. Apparently,
it's just easier
for him to give her
a normal American name.
I can tell that this irritates A the more he does it, so we hatch a plan together. I only refer to him as Olafur, Icelandic, and she only calls him Odinlate, Nigerian. Of course he gets pissed off, but we both tell him how it's
just easier
for us to give him a name from our respective countries. It took him just under 2 weeks after that to start calling her by her proper name. Though he never got my name wrong, I suspect because I'm a white European man, the solidarity still felt good. Guys, I'm curious, do any of you have a name that is really difficult to pronounce? Let us know in the comments if you want. If you want to destroy employee morale and benefits, then maybe you won't work here anymore. Several years ago, I was just out of college and took a job at a large well-known alcohol store that rhymes with a total shine and floor. By the way, I'm not really familiar with any alcohol stores in the US, so if you guys could help out, that would be amazing. Anyway, I was hired as a seasonal employee for the Christmas season. After working there a few weeks, the permanent employees were telling me about how the current store manager, SM, was relatively new. When SM became the boss, he changed all of the full-time employees' schedules so that no one worked more than the maximum number of hours per week, I think it was 34, before the state required they be provided benefits like health insurance. Before SM, many of the full-timers had set hours and benefits. SM also began creating the employee schedule with no regard to employee input of their availability, as many had second jobs and childcare obligations, nor what the schedules looked like before he came in as SM. He was also not wonderful about customer service. I was a merchandiser, which means I was responsible for moving the boxes and pallets around the store and stocking shelves. I knew absolutely nothing about wine, but I was and am a beer geek, so I was always happy to help with beer questions. There was one instance I went out of my way to get beer from the storage shelf, which needed a ladder to access to get a case that was out of stock on the customer shelf. The storage area had zero organization nor record keeping, so finding a case could take a while. After finding and retrieving the beer, he pulled me aside and said that I should have just told them we were out and to only put that kind of effort in if someone is spending a lot of money, which really set me off, and I fumed silently the rest of that day. To no one's surprise, the store became a revolving door for workers, as this had already been going on for several months by the time I started. When the holiday season was nearing the end, SM radioed me to come to the office one day. When I get there, he's looking at the computer and says,
"Hey Ritson, we would like for you to convert to full time."
Wow, what a surprise! We were down to 3 or 4 merchandisers by this time.
"But if you're not, I need to know by January X, which is 3 weeks away. If you quit after that, it counts against my employee turnover numbers."
While I was planning to quit the following week, since I lined up a much better job that did not need me urgently, I decided I would do my part and wait. The day after the turnover date, I quit. Several months later, I visited the store, said hi to folks and asked where SM was. To my great amusement, SM had been let go shortly after my departure. I would like to think I did my part to help that along. My uncle took revenge on behalf of my parents. As the title gives away, this did not happen to me, but is the story of how my uncle avenged my parents. My parents had me when they were plenty young. They were not teens anymore, but had barely left that age bracket. My mom and dad met in college, that was also when they had me. So, while my parents were in their courses, I mostly stayed with my grandparents. The whole family lives in the same area and the college was not that far away. My parents were still young and liked to go out with friends on occasion. When the following happened, I was a few years old. On occasion, they frequented a bar. A drunk guy there groped my mom and did not take a no as a no. My dad intervened and stopped the guy. And half an hour later, all seemed forgotten. The music was loud, the bar crowded, and then someone in the crowd hit my dad with an empty glass pitcher square in the face. He was bleeding profusely and collapsed. But in the press, semi-darkness, and over the music, no one knew who did it. My dad got taken to the hospital. He had a broken nose and a heavy concussion. He also could not see who had attacked him, and his memory between the alcohol and being hit in the head was also very fuzzy. Of course, they had considered the guy who had harassed my mom, but they did not know him. Nor did they see him anywhere leading up to the moment, let alone have any evidence, so they pressed charges against unknown. But there was virtually nothing anyone could do. But then, a few days later, the piece of crap that had harassed my mom approached her on campus. Turns out he was in the same college as my parents. We made a few veiled comments and left little doubt that it had been him that hit my dad in the face. And the piece of garbage let my mom know that my dad next time should mind his manners. And that the little touching he had done did not hurt anyone and was not that bad. And if he wanted to do it again, he would, and maybe more. And then the piece of crap went on his merry way. My mom was horrified, of course. She went home and told my grandparents, my dad, and his parents. But no one could do anything. It was a he said she said deal after all. And my mom had not even gotten the guy's name. My mom cried a lot at that time and did not know what to do. She also was afraid of going to classes or out alone. I honestly only remember that time very scarcely, I was just a little kid. But I can remember my dad in the hospital and with his broken nose. And my mom crying a lot. My dad, of course, was just as angry and humiliated as my mom. No one knew what to do and everyone was treading on eggshells around each other. But that is where my uncle enters the stage. My uncle, my mom's brother, lived on the other side of the country. He was a PI and he was, of course, the last to hear the full story. But the moment he heard someone had threatened his little sister, he was on his way home. After hearing the full story, my uncle knew it would likely be hard to get the guy on the harassment, the assault or the threats, having no evidence. My uncle had my mom point the guy out from afar on campus. It took a few days to find him. But then my uncle started to stalk that piece of human filth. My uncle took sick days, all his vacation, and invested every second possible to find out everything about the harasser. My uncle even approached the pig in another bar and became drinking buddies with him. Over several weeks, my uncle had uncovered all manners of illicit behavior: possession, consumption and distribution of drugs, theft and a few other misdemeanors and small-time stuff. And my uncle could have put him away for that, but my uncle always said, when asked about that if he sent the a-hole to prison, it would be for molesting my mom and hurting my dad. And that is what he did. One night, while out with his new buddy drinking, my uncle made the idiot piss drunk and they landed in my uncle's motel room. He got the harasser to incriminate himself on video, rattling off a list of illegal crap he was up to. My uncle had, of course, pretended to be a crook too. Among the stories a-hole told was the story of how he groped some chick and brained her dude with a pitcher of beer. Now, something needs to be said. In my country, of course, recording someone in secret is illegal and under some conditions, like if the police does it, it is not a permissible piece of evidence in court. But as a PI, I suppose that means police officer or something, my uncle knew that laws for that exactly. But paradoxically, the situation is different if it is not only audio but also video. And my uncle had the a-hole on camera confessing. The next day, my uncle turned himself into the police with all his collected evidence because secretly filming people was still a crime. Though the video could be used as evidence in court as my uncle was not affiliated with the police or any other governmental agency. When the criminal trial and the civil trial were over, the a-hole got 6 years in prison and had to pay damages to my mom and dad. And my uncle got slapped with the equivalent of a $2,000 fine for secretly filming that a-hole. Money well spent, he always said. You know guys, I find it really interesting that the uncle after all had to pay $2,000 because he filmed that guy secretly. I'm wondering if in another situation, if you film someone robbing a store, whether you still have to pay that $2,000 fine when you present the evidence to the police. Seems like a silly rule to me, especially when you film a criminal. I am the Padawan, my dad is the master. This story is from r/Nuclear Revenge. Back in 1991, my dad bought my mom a brand new Chevy Caprice. You know, the big, ugly, fat as a whale cop car. It was white with fake mesh wheels and white wall tires. My mother loved it. She had it 2 weeks and kept it parked in front of our house in SoCal. The guy across the street was a contractor. Back in 1991, that basically meant shady douchebag that hired illegals that stood outside Home Depot. Shady douche started remodeling a house up the street from us on our side of the road. They were doing some stucco work. At the end of the day, his workers decided to just dump the leftover stucco in the gutter and try to hose it down the street. It got all over my mom's tires, she did not notice, drove off and it went all over the passenger side of her car. My dad was not happy, not one bit. We went across the street to talk to the contractor neighbor. My dad is a 6'3" Air Force Vietnam Purple Heart recipient. He has fired a weapon in anger. Neighbor was a 5'4" a-hole with an attitude. Dad goes over and explains the situation, actually keeping his calm. He asks the guy to have the stucco removed from the car. The neighbor tells my dad to go F himself. I'm expecting my dad at this point to kill said neighbor. Instead he says, okay, and walks back across the street. He has my mom's car detailed, and that is that. 7 years later, my dad and I are watching a Laker game, and it is about 10 at night and it is halftime. My dad says, "I will be right back." He walks out of the house, goes into the garage and gets 2 1-gallon buckets of paint. He walks across the street and dumps it all over the neighbor's brand new BMW convertible. The neighbor had left the top down because it was in May and the weather was nice in Southern California. So the entire outside and inside of the BMW is now covered in paint. My dad walks back, puts the paint cans back in the garage, closes the door and comes back to watch the rest of the game. The next morning, the neighbor comes out and sees his car. We hear him saying out loud to his wife,
"I don't understand who would have done this. I don't get this at all."
He had forgotten all about the stucco. My dad just waited and waited. Fast forward to now, 7 years ago, an a-hole down my road hit my dog and killed him, then drove off. I found his hubcap in the road next to my dog and confronted him.
"Oh, I thought it was a deer."
I am waiting for a really nice day. The paint is ready in my basement. And guys, unfortunately, we have already reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and if you haven't already, please also go to patreon.com/RipeYouTube, where I upload exclusive Reddit videos starting at just $3 a month. This is a great way to support me in case you are interested, and the chance for me to become independent from YouTube revenue. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.